Do you know that if not for a massive fire in 1961, we might not be living in HDB flats now? Watch on to know more about the Bukit Ho Swee fire that kind of created today's Singapore. So, before anything, you need to know about the old Bukit Ho Swee. Back then, in 1961, people lived in kampongs. It's the same over at Bukit Ho Swee. Over there, it was a kampong, a scurrying squatter settlement made out of wooden houses with Attap roof, packed tightly together along narrow, winding lanes. By 1961, almost 20,000 people were living in these Attap huts. Now, you have to remember what these homes were actually made of. Attap is dry palm leaf, and the houses themselves were largely built out of wood. When you pack thousands of homes like that side by side, with barely any space between them, you have, without meaning to, created the perfect conditions for a fire to spread. The people who lived there understood this danger very well, and they lived with the constant risk of fire every single day. And on 25th May 1961, that risk finally came true in the worst possible way. Now, I know you are wondering how a fire could change Singapore altogether, but watch on because this will become relevant soon. The fire had become small. You see, a fire first broke out at the squatter hut near Kampong Tiong Bahru Road, and from there, it spread into neighbouring Bukit Ho Swee. The problem was that, on that particular afternoon, there were strong winds blowing across the settlement. In a village built almost entirely of wood and dry leaf, wind is the worst enemy you can imagine. The fire intensified quickly, leaping from house to house and engulfing the settlement, and residents were forced to abandon everything they owned and run for their lives. The emergency response was enormous for that time. Around 180 firemen and 22 fire engines were deployed to fight the fire, supported by nearly 1,000 army personnel who helped control the panicking crowds. Later on, around 1,500 policemen were sent in to patrol the charred grounds and to protect whatever belongings had survived from being looped. By the time the fire was finally brought under control that night, around 40 hectares of land, roughly the size of 56 football fields, had been burned. A school, shops, factories, and thousands of homes had been reduced to ashes. 4 people died and 85 people were injured, and around 16,000 people were left homeless. Anyways, what's even more surprising is that as of now, we still do not know the cause of the fire. There are many theories, but I will not list them here. Instead, what you need to know is that sometimes the only way to improve is to go through a crisis, and this is one good example, because you can say that modern Singapore is built after this crisis. If you are looking to advertise your business in this channel, we can help you. There are guaranteed views and many big brands have trusted us. Just click on the link in the description. You see, what happened in the days that follow is the part that truly changed Singapore. On the very next day, just one day after the fire, then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew held an emergency cabinet meeting, and out of it came a clear plan. The fire victims will be moved into flats that were either already completed or still being built in places such as Queenstown, Tiong Bahru, Kallang, and Bukit Ho Swee itself. The government then acquired the burned down land and cleared away the unauthorized structures that had stood there. After that, they began to build, and they built remarkably quickly. The newly formed Housing and Development Board, which we all know today as the HDB, put up the first 5 blocks, amounting to 768 flats in just 9 months. When you stop to think about that speed, it's really striking, going from ashes to finished homes in less than a year. By February 1962, less than a year after the fire had torn through the area, all the remaining affected families had been rehoused. And to understand why this one fire matters so much, you have to remember that the HDB had only been formed in 1960. It was still a very new organization, and the Bukit Ho Swee fire became its first major test, a national emergency that forced Singapore to build public housing at a speed and on a scale that had never been attempted before. And it worked because the disaster cemented the case for building safe, modern homes for ordinary people, and over the years that followed, thousands more flats rose up to the cleared land. By 1967, the area had been transformed into a modern housing estate. A historian who actually grew up in the very flats built after the fire later wrote a book about it, and he gave it a title that captures the whole story in just a few words, describing this as the fire that turned squatters into citizens. And as you know now, today, HDB flats are home to about 80% of Singapore's resident households, and that remarkable public housing story, which is one of the things Singapore is best known for around the world, has one of its biggest turning points right here in the ashes of Bukit Ho Swee. Now, of course, even after that, another crisis still occurred, which led to another improvement in Singapore, the collapse of the Hotel New World. To know more about that, watch this. Also, if you want to advertise with us, even as a standalone video, do contact us. Our website is in the description, or you can scan this QR code. Thank you for spending almost 5 minutes with me. I really appreciate it and hope you learned something.